Thank you all for coming out tonight. As you all know, we only have 90 chairs. They're all out. We're a humble nonprofit, so if you want to help us buy some more chairs, please contribute to the box over there. We did, a few seconds ago, manage to rig it up so we can project the panel discussion and the readings on that screen. We'll also be able to show the film on that screen. So for those of you in the mosh pit over there, all you have to do is turn around. And are we going to get started now or in a few minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, people, 5 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to try to get things underway here. Thank you for coming. It's an amazing turnout. I'm sorry if it's inconvenient for some of you. If you're standing around the perimeter of the room, please be careful of the paintings. Don't lean against the paintings. Don't mess them up. I'm not going to do too much in the way of introductions. Just say that we're kind of keeping the spirit of Rene alive. There's so many people who loved him and continue to love him, and his work's been very important. Rene made me his executor before he died, and one of the things that people say to me is, how come there's nothing out that's affordable and available? In a couple of months there will be a very generous selected poems at an extremely affordable price, because it is terrible when you get on the internet to find his work. You see how expensive it is, but we're working on it. It's very, it's really meaningful to me to have Gerard Malanga here this evening. A lot of people know certain things about Gerard. You know that he was the guy who actually printed all of the Warhol silkscreen paintings in the 60s and performed with the Velvet Underground and the Exploding Plastic Inevitable. A lot of people don't know that when he left the factory at the end of the 60s, he went to work at the Dia Foundation for Heine Friedrich and Philippe Dumenil, and he ran their publication program, and the first book he did was Rene Ricard, 1979-1980, which was Rene's first book. And it's made up entirely of poems that Gerard saved. If you go up to his archives at the Beinecke at Yale, why do you keep holding that up? It's distracting. What's that mean? Just put it down, okay?
Yeah.
If you go up to the Beinecke at Yale, and you go through Gerard's archives, you find like 150 poems from the 1960s, as well as journals, as well as letters. Rene's first reading in New York was at Izzy Young's Folklore Center in 1965. He read a series of poems called the Malanga Poems. They go way back, and he's had a really important role in Rene's career and in his work. So it's especially gratifying to have him here this evening, because he doesn't do these things very often. We're going to start off Richard Hell, who has a retrospective of 50 years of small press publications. He started his first magazine in New York when he arrived here at the age of 17, and he's still doing extraordinary publications. The 40th anniversary edition of Black Generation just came out. 40 years, that went fast. And he's going to start things off this evening. Richard Hell.
Hi everybody, and thank you Raymond for arranging all this and keeping Rene in the air. Actually, it occurred to me that Rene is maybe one of the 2 people I can think of who are gone, who for weeks and weeks and weeks after he died, I could actually physically sense that something was missing in New York, and that continues whenever he comes to my mind. He was unique. For some reason, I have engraved in my brain this one image of him from a long, long time ago when I was in my early 20s. I don't know if I'd even met him at this time, though I knew who he was, and I was soon to know him. But it's this image of Rene in this crowded room. It was at the Club 82 on 4th Street. Yeah, which is like a mob-run lesbian bar, cross-dressing. For a moment there, and I think the Dolls initiated this, they put on rock and roll shows for a brief period. And the Dolls did a concert there. It was 1974, it must have been, which was actually the only concert in which they actually wore women's clothes. Like David Johansen was in a little black cocktail dress. And Rene was there. The whole place was psychedelically glowing. And there was a lobby area, and it was just roiling with people. And for some reason, must have been going up the stairs. The place is underground. It was like below street level. And I was going up the stairs, and I looked back, and there in the center of this crowd of people, towering over them, at least in my mind, was Rene, like doing a pirouette. And he was just glowing, and it was as if he was lit by a spotlight, and it just burned into my brain. Rene in this state of sort of transport, and I'm glad I have that in my brain. So Raymond assigned me a few poems. Is this mine?
No, they're in the book. Where's your book?
You said you printed them out. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm reading 4 or 5 poems of Rene's. I dream about Morocco and starting a new career. I spend all my money on odds and ends. The smallest errand takes a week to plan. I sit in the kitchen and hear the water drip on the aluminum takeout plate from the Chinese takeout place. I've been a year and a half and haven't bought one dish. The electricity wasn't connected until last month. Something really awful is going to happen soon. This is called Edit View, and that's what Edit Diak, right?
Yeah.
It's festive tonight, you said, and I stared out into the blasted ruin of my life. Rene was actually the greatest poetry reader of all time. He was, I mean, you would not want to miss any opportunity to see Rene read. He was just a dynamo. Anyway, it's festive tonight, you said, as I stared out into the blasted ruin of my life. It's, quote, festive, tossing a sequin into the pit. The word falls flat. It's midnight, square time, time of the dogs. 19 cigarettes left. God with the revolver. The inside of the body pushes towards the outside, and I push myself through streets full of men, cafes full of men. I order a coffee from a man. Men push through the street in front of the cafes, bargain in black eyes, my life overflowing its bounds. I can't buy food, negotiate the streets, or bargain in this life. There are men everywhere, the magnificent saber of Islam in their eyes. Men terrify me. Beauty terrifies me. Beautiful men terrify me. And I would faint in the Barbet mud, the inside of my body pushing towards the outside. I sit in a cafe in Barbès, and a woman walks by in tears. The God of Islam is the God of love, and I know that love is a terrible thing, and a God of love will finish my life. Love is the steepest bargain of terrible price. The heart pushes towards the outside. The heart is a souk. One civilization dents another, pushing towards the outside. And I would pass out in the marketplace, men everywhere. My life, not such important merchandise. The inside pushes me further out. I would die here without murder or suicide. Barbès or Essaouira. Essaouira. Is this all in Morocco? Yeah. Thank you. Full of men, the God of Islam, 18 years old, 100 francs, a God with a revolver. And finally, and so if I should kill myself tonight and snuff out a lifetime of learning and a vast repositorium of lore without a biographical text to explain these scattered notes, would you publish my letters and reveal the angle that you had on me? So if I kill myself tonight, stop the headache and the genius all at once. Then you could show my letters to the world, show I loved you once, and your new lover, when he's forgot your name, can say, I knew Rene Ricard and asked him once to leave my house.
Anne Waldman is up at the Museum of Modern Art. There's a memorial service this evening for Vito Acconci, and she's speaking there, and she's coming down afterwards. So when she gets here, she's going to just come up. The first poem in this book to Anne is to Anne Waldman. The third poem is written to Alice Notley, who was one of Rene's favorite poets and a dear friend. And Alice's son, Anselm Berrigan, is here this evening. He grew up in the same building that Rene lived in at 437 East 12th Street, and like most of us, was subjected to this 50-year spectacular reign of terror. We're very pleased to have him here this evening to read a couple of poems from Rene's first book, Anselm Berrigan.
Hey, everybody. I'm sorry, Raymond. I spent a lot of time in 437 East 12th Street, but I grew up on 101 St. Mark's Place, and which Rene visited many times. And I heard many stories of his relationship with the building on 12th Street. But I should say, I met him when I was 6 or 7, and I remember him reaching down the front of my t-shirt, tickling me really hard for a long time, and leaving a $1 bill. And I remember him coming over to visit us after my father died in 1983, and he was one of the people who came around every now and then to check in and see how my mom was doing, as I imagine it now. And one time I was down on the steps with my friend Lawrence, and I was 10 or 11, and Lawrence was a little older, and Rene came down and said, "Don't go upstairs just yet. Your mother just got out of the bath. She looks really dewy and beautiful. Just give her a few more minutes." And Lawrence was standing there like, who is this dude? And he looked at Lawrence and was like, this is about 1985. So I looked at Lawrence, like, you like sports, don't you? Lawrence was like, yeah. And he said, watch out for those steroids. They're going to shrivel everybody's testicles. And the only other thing I should say is that sometime after that, he and Louis came bursting into our apartment and claiming the cops were after them. And in fact, they had run out from a bill at a restaurant around the corner. They stared out the window for a while trying to see if anybody was chasing them. And then they decided everything was cool. And they left, and Rene told Louis that we needed to be properly thanked. So Louis put all this graffiti on the inside of our front door and said that that would protect us from the mob if anybody broke in. And needless to say, it worked. I'd ever read these two poems. One is called September, and the next is called All Day. They seem to be written out of somewhat opposing moods. September. Studio 54 reopens. The photographer's ball at Xenon, new club opening Friday night, and a cocktail reception before that. Tonight is the Avedon opening at the Met. I have to move out of here today, leave my party clothes behind, leave my suntan, go back to East 12th Street, the rent unpaid for months, eviction soon, no phone, no electricity, no mailbox key, no way to get in touch with me, no way for Louis to get in touch with me. Now I can really fail, blame myself, cry all night, shiver with fear, short day, long night, my beard growing, hair growing too. One pair of jeans, loafers worn to death, no radio, no bed, soon hunger strikes. Unable to defend myself, thoroughly weakened, prey to all manner of predators, born without and within. Hating myself, in trouble with the law. This is the year that will take forever. With luck, I'll be killed, or lose my mind, be rescued by the state. I just don't want to go to jail like my father for murder. He was so desperate too. I don't want to hurt anyone but myself or drag them down with me, but I can't face it alone. I want to hide, sit this out, sleep a few months, wake up Christmas Eve. Last year I had such a good time with Leslie and Dolores and Louis coming over all the time. Vagabonds, all in love, everything new. How could people be so close and now punished by so much distance from them? Leslie moving out, bye Leslie. Dolores out there, bye Do. Louis, you'll never get out of there, bye baby, bye bye. I got beat up so bad this summer, and I'm still getting beat up for it, losing what I most want, wanting what I'll never have, but time is running out. I feel a little better, well, enough to pack up and get out. This is all day. So this is reality too. Come in, and now you're here, all swept up for you, the floor shiny, and our wonderful pet, the antelope, clatters its little hooves on the floor to eat from your hand. All the pictures you love on the walls and your favorite books read themselves aloud, and you can leave if you want to. Just turn the page, or have the kids come over for cake. Little Louis from downstairs, he likes you so much, he brings his friends too, the 12-year-old girl. She loves it here. We give her shiny hair and crackling petticoats. It's always just after school and just before supper. The flower in the flower pot smiles all day in the sunshine and waves its little leaves when you come home. Such a bright yellow floor and such a big cozy bed. It says, hey, get up, or you've got a temperature, or stay here with me, let's watch TV all day. Sometimes there's a moon when we're alone, but it's always the grinning kind that hangs from a thin wire. Oh yeah, the stars have 5 neat points. The coffee pot giggles, and the dishes wash themselves with their little rubber gloves, squealing and laughing. You have that effect on things, and even the bathroom, so often left out of things, is happy when you're home. Thank you.
Okay, so what's going to happen is Gerard and I are going to have a conversation. I'm going to interview Gerard for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to see 3 short films by Rita Barros. Rene more or less lived with Rita in the Chelsea Hotel the last 10 or 15 years of his life. He had an apartment downstairs, but it was too messy to live in, so he lived at Rita's place. So we're going to watch 3 short films that run for 7 minutes. Then we're going to have about a 10-minute break while the Easy Keys set up. The Easy Keys are a duo from Brooklyn who have set Rene's poems to music. They've made songs from his poems. Here's Anne Waldman. They've set Rene's poems to music, and they have an album out, which is on sale tonight. It's one of the main reasons why we're here this evening. The other reason was a French edition of Rene's first book, bilingual edition, that Rachel Valinsky and Manon Lutani are editing and publishing and translating. It's not quite ready yet. They've put a lot of care into it, and they just had a problem with a publisher who went bankrupt, and they had to find a new publisher. But it's coming along. There'll be another event about that soon. So after the break, the easy keys will appear. So I guess Gerard and I will have a conversation now. Then we'll have Anne read, and then we'll show the films, and then we'll get on to the music. So Gerard, how do you want to begin? Where do you want to begin? I know you wrote a couple of poems about Rene, and of course you edited this book. Where do you want to start?
Well, I would start at the very beginning, the very vivid remark that Rene made. The first thing he said to me when he met me was that, well, it took place at the factory in late March of 1965. He arrived with his boyfriend, Steve's. What was the boyfriend's name? Stephen. Jonas? No, Stephen something or other. Anyway, he arrived with his boyfriend, Stephen. And the first thing Rene said to me, I was there by myself, he says, I've come to seek you out. I always remember that, to seek me out, like I'm being sought after or something. Anyway, we had a nice chat, and then shortly after, maybe a week later, Andy and I and Edie went to Paris for a month, and when we came back, I had asked Ronnie Tavel, who had written a script for Edie called Kitchen, if he could give a part in the movie for Rene. So there's an unspoken part in the full movie of Rene washing dishes in the background. He really got into character, I might say. And so that was his debut as an underground movie star at that time. Somewhere along the line, and Rene hadn't written any poetry yet, but I sensed something about him. There was something very poetic and very lovely about the way he used words, and I said, you should really maybe write some poetry. So within a month, he showed me a number of poems. I mean, there was not an eyelash out of place. It was quite amazing to see what he had accomplished. And I'm going to read you a couple of poems that thus appeared in the first book that Dia published. And I'm pretty certain that the first poem in the book, which is a poem I then published in a series called Aspen Box a year later, and the poem is a quote for John Steeves, actually. Is his name.
John Steeves.
Yeah, so the quote is, "The stones have begun making me sick," for John Steeves. And I believe this is actually literally the first poem he wrote. But it stopped a week ago when my thought left a reflection that turned frozen in the mirror. The stones have begun making me sick. It was all I could tell him. Yes, I feel like crying, but the pain has been localized. This morning, there is no lyric. Next poem is a favorite of mine that's also in the book, called Mannerism. These are the problems which inhabit the imagination. Tincture of opium, redolent eucalyptus balm, the constituent order fails at any attempted rescue. The end of a soft brown epoch. Some things were marvelous. Bring on the Byzantine, the gilded Orient, spoiling Venice's moldy sewer. Why must they build their capitals on swamps? Paris, London, Moscow. We find the remaining fragments bizarre. It's the mulch of the cul-de-sac, tempting our languor with that dead clutter sensation. Like a fallow field. The party's over, and we remember this. At a certain point in our friendship, we had probably a rare instance of a lengthy correspondence. He was living in Venice, California at the time, and had encircled himself with his latest group of fans, mostly graduates from Yale University. What they were doing in Venice, I have no idea. But in any case, the last letter that Rene sent to me, which I saved, the other letters are at Yale, but this one was dated July 4th, 1975, but he crossed out the July and put August, so he obviously was a bit distracted there. And the letter goes like this. Jerry, I told someone today that I've got photos by you, and she practically rimmed me. You're great to send me stuff and $signs. I guess I'm having fun for a widow. Is, I think I can't read this. Is Rianne? Diane. Oh, is Diane, that was Diane Hersey. Is Diane Hersey well with you? I haven't met Chris Isherwood yet. I've got a great place to live. Good pictures. People like me. Guess I really hate it here. Thanks and love, Rene.
Gerard, I want to back up to Boston for a minute. There's two things I'd like to know about Boston from your point of view. One is the presence of John Wieners and what he meant to Rene and what he meant to you as a poet, and then Andy's show at the ICA and the trip with the Velvets up there. And could you talk
Well, that was a real adventure, that period, and I think it was in October when the Velvets performed at the ICA. I think that was in October of, in fact, I know it was in October of '66. And I was having a romance with a young model at the time named Benedetta Barzini. And she had a car, so we were driving up, and Rene came with us. Somehow he was in New York at the time, but he was really stationed in Cambridge or Boston. And we had stopped at the Leo Castelli Gallery to pick up a poster that Benedetta was going to give to a friend of hers up in Cambridge. And Leo asked us if there was room in the car for a French journalist, and of course we took this gentleman along with us up to Cambridge. And I think it was that night that the performance took place at the ICA, which I choreographed. And it was quite a spectacular evening. And there was a party afterwards at Ed Hood's house, apartment on Mount Auburn area, but it really got to be very smoky, so we skedoodled it out of there at a certain point. And we were staying at Gordon Baldwin's apartment a few doors down the street. And the next morning, Marie Casindus came by to do our portrait, which was quite a glamorous affair. She was the first photographer to be recognized for her Polaroid portraits. A Polaroid Corporation was actually supporting her work. And she ended up taking pictures of Benedetta and I, and then she did I think it was a black and white, I didn't see the color, but she photographed Rene and John Wieners and me at the apartment also, and I have a print of that. And my friendship with Rene was sort of in and out. It was in periods because he was never really based in New York. He was basically up and down the coast, and he was in Boston and Cambridge a lot of the time. And many times when I would come up to Cambridge to stay with Ed Hood, I would make sure to see Rene. So friendship kept on going on and on through the years up until the time of Rene's first book of poems.
Rene told me about that Warhol show at the ICA. He said, I sat in front of a Warhol flower painting for 2 hours, and I planned out my entire life. What did Andy think of Rene?
Andy was scared of Rene. That's true, actually. In fact, I opened up my chapter on Rene in my autobiography, where actually the question that opens up the chapter to me, Andy says to me, "What do you see in Rene?" And I sort of segued into that question with an answer that was kind of long and complicated, but it basically set the pace for how our friendship developed from that point on in the mid-'60s.
Do you want to talk about how the Dia book came about?
I try to make it as short as possible. It's a chapter in my book. But Rene was always wanting to have a book of poetry done, but we couldn't really find the right venue for it. And then when I went to work for Dia, I spoke with Heiner about maybe starting a publication series, and basically Heiner and Philippa gave me carte blanche to do whatever I wanted. So the first book I did in the series, and it basically was the only book. I mean, I developed an archive for a fellow friend of mine, Angus MacLeese. But anyway, back to Rene, is that I was able to work on this book from the beginning to end, because what was happening at the time was that Rene was becoming very scattered about his manuscripts, and he was, losing things, and it just got very complicated and messy. So a way of organizing this was to create a book for him. And I basically set two precedents in having this book develop. Was that first precedent was that Rene received a $5,000 advance for the book of poetry. Now, no poet at that time was getting a $5,000 advance. I mean, God knows what Rene did with that $5,000 in 1 week, I would imagine. I don't know what he did, but it went very quickly. The second precedent was that Heiner and I, we had to publicize the book, so Heiner came up with an idea of creating 5 poetry readings to publicize the book. And Rene would be paid $1,000 per reading, which ended up to be another $5,000. So maybe about a month after this was all established and worked out, I was at Dia one afternoon, and one of the executives, a very sweet lady named Margaret Thatcher, stopped me in the office, and she said, "We have a problem." I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, we heard Rene made a phone call to the office stating that he was coming to the office to pick up his first $1,000 for a reading that he was giving with Alice Notley in a godforsaken cafe in Staten Island somewhere." Well, this was not going to sit well with Heiner, okay? First of all, it was a reading that the Dia Foundation did not organize. So I had to be the messenger. And Margaret said, can you sort of explain this to Rene? I said, "Well, I'll try." So a few days later, I happened to run into him at an art gallery opening, and I said, "Rene, I have a problem I have to sort out with you." I started explaining to him Dia's position on this situation. Well, he would not hear anything of it. He accused me of withholding funds that belonged to him, and literally turned on his heel and walked away. So that was the end of our long, long friendship, actually. I realized at that point that Rene held grudges. And as the saying goes, kill the messenger. So that's pretty much the history of the book. The poetry reading series was never established. He lost his $1,000 plus the other $4,000 that he would have been paid had he behaved, but he didn't. So that's the end of the story.
Now, the fact that this was the first and only poetry book in that series, was that because of Rene and his behavior, do you think?
I think it was it contributed partly to it. What happened was the series ended, but then Philippa came back to me a year later because she was very interested in Angus's music, and she knew that I was very close with Angus. So she commissioned me to develop an archive on Angus's work for the foundation.
Which is at the Beinecke, and is an extraordinary archive. I mean, basically, it's a complete Angus MacLeese.
Yeah, it's as complete as it can be. Yeah. Angus was very elusive and obscure in his own way, but he was a very lovable person. So those were the 2 projects that I worked on, and then I went on with my own work after that.
And Rene lived at your apartment off and on in the 60s?
Well, in the mid to late 70s, he lived in my apartment for a year. And actually, the first thing he said when he arrived is, our correspondence has ended. Well, yes, I guess we're not going to be writing letters to each other at this point. So the other thing that happened was I had a beautiful cat, black Siamese cat named Eben, and there was a cabinet in the apartment, and Rene had arrived with this beautiful little delicate Art Deco lamp stand with a shade, and he managed to put it on top of the cabinet and plug it in. And of course, Eben jumped up on the cabinet and knocked the lamp over, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces. I got to say, Rene was a very good sport about that. He said, well, you know, and he just threw his hands up and said, well, those things happen. So, but that was the beginning of the year that we lived together at the apartment, and it gave me the opportunity to create a photo archive of Rene, which I think is probably the largest picture series of him living the life or living the good life in New York City, because all of a sudden my social level zoomed, actually, because of him. I ended up going to parties and photographing him with so and so and so and so, or museum openings or whatever. I always had the camera with me, and he loved being photographed, and I developed this archive, a photo archive of him at various stages during that period of time he was living with me.
And what was he like to live with? Because I lived at the Chelsea Hotel, and I'm on the 8th floor, and he was on the 9th floor. And even though, you know, Rene is, you know of him as being a really crazy person, he actually was like really marvelously domestic and cozy, and you know, he'd come down in his pajamas and we'd listen to opera. I mean, he was really kind of sweet and a lot of fun to live with.
Well, first of all, I was living on a 4-flight walk-up on 14th Street near 3rd Avenue, next to a building called the Sierra Hotel, which was basically, at the time, it was kind of a prostitute house. But, and it's no longer there. There's now an NYU dormitory, but the building I lived in is still there, actually. Anyway, Rene arrived, and I lived a very simple lifestyle. There was nothing fancy to go by, but he was very domestic. He kept things in manageable balance in the apartment, and we lived a good life for a year. Also, it should be known that when he arrived east from Venice, California, his so-called fans, that is, were able to get him on SSI. This is for somebody who never worked a day in his life. So he got on SSI, and he was getting $1,200 a month from Social Security, insurance, and so he had money to live on while he was in New York with me.
And that trip to Venice, I understand that he actually went out there to see if he could write TV sitcoms. Do you know anything about that?
I have no idea.
Yeah, when Mary Hartman came out, which was a great TV show and one of the first really kind of freeform, brilliant writer type shows, somebody offered him a position to go out there and develop a TV show, and that's why he went to Venice.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I think Rene had I don't know if I would call it a bad habit, but he always played hard to get on a certain level. And by doing that, he actually threw people off and away from him. So God knows what they offered him, and God knows what he counted with, you know. But I think he might have been pretty good at doing sitcoms. But I think the problem with Rene is that if you gave him an assignment, or if you gave him something to do, he would find fault with doing it, or he didn't want it, or he got lazy, or whatever, he got distracted. Sadly, he was not a very disciplined person when it came to assignments or deadlines, you see.
Do you remember at the party for this Dia book at Books and Company?
Yes.
When he gave the book to Andy, and Andy looked at it and he said, "So many years and so few poems."
Well, I think I heard this before once, but I wasn't actually standing there when Andy said that. But you could see the intonation and how that was inflected. It was almost like Andy was getting even with Rene in a certain way.
Of course, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many. I mean, if you write a dozen great poems, that's.
But Andy wouldn't understand that intellectual side of it, actually himself.
Did Rene have a community of poets around him? Did he?
Well, I introduced him to a community of poets, and Anne could attest to this to a certain extent. I mean, she ended, and I encouraged her, and she published Rene in Angel Hair, which was great. And but I think at the very beginning, because Rene had no track record to stand by, and we're talking, you know, maybe almost 15 years before this first book came out. Rene was just like somebody who stepped out of an alien rocket ship and landed in the middle of the poetry community. And I'm sure a number of poets were very weary of Rene at first. But I think what happened was they got accustomed to Rene's presence and his personality and his charm, which was a very important factor. And I think it worked in his favor, ultimately.
I always felt Rene was just smarter than everybody else, and consequently, he was bored a lot. And when he got bored, he got malicious, and he was just always kind of poking people to get some kind of reaction. But it was just kind of a sort of play. He had a lot of friends in the fashion world. I mean, we were talking about Antonio Lopez the other day, great fashion.
Yeah, I went to high school with Antonio Lopez. Yeah. Antonio and Calvin Klein and the Cuccio brothers. We were the golden age of the class of 1960 at the High School of Industrial Art, as it was called in those days.
Fashion was an important part of his life, was it? Or
well, I think it seemed to connect. Everything seemed to connect in a pattern and a sequence.
It was a milieu. It was a mode.
Yeah, I don't think it was there at the very beginning when I first met him, but I think he assimilated that aspect of it, and it probably took place maybe after the publication of the first book.
What was his relationship with Lou Reed like?
I don't know if he really had a relationship with Lou Reed. I'm not really aware of that. Any instance where there was a communication between the two of them.
Was he painting and drawing a lot in those days, the way he was later?
I photographed two of his, I think they were about, 3 feet high by maybe, 18 inches, 20 inches across. I photographed his first two written poems. They were nothing other than his handwriting, but painted on masonite. I don't think it was canvas. So I have those documented. I don't know who has them, but they belong to I forget the sisters there. One of them was a photographer. The other one sadly committed suicide. But they were in this girl's loft, friends of Rene's.
And what about his relationship with some of the other actors and actresses, the superstars? Who was he particularly close to, or was that just something he was passing through at the time?
I don't know if he was passing through. I tried to introduce him to I want to call it the underground cinema milieu. I introduced him to Pierre Halixer, for instance, and he was in one of Pierre's movies, playing himself for whatever reason. But I don't know if anything clicked with the underground film movement. Where it could have been very interesting in terms of documentation, but there's very little of that exists, I believe.
You have a couple of poems that you wrote about him.
I'll read you one of those poems, and then I'm going to finish with maybe 2 or 3 poems that Raymond offered me to read, so you get a little bit of a treat. I wrote two poems, maybe about I don't know when I wrote them, a couple of years ago. Let me see, where are they? Okay. Oh, here. No, they would be here. Oh, I know where they are. They're still in the folder. This was written, actually, after Rene passed away. So it's called Rene Ricard, 1946, 2014. What will the world do without you? The clubs, the many vernissage, going back as far as 1966. The black tie Whitney inaugural, when Charles Moore clicked one of those historic photographs no one knows about, the one and only frame, you and Andy, Benedetta, me, clustered round the look of good times far ahead, all those bright moments and dark ones too, the yesteryears to come, the camaraderie, the nights we'd be up house sitting if we're so lucky, the struggle if even that, the flow of words ceaselessly. What will the world do without your poetry, your jack-in-the-box, your flitting round like a firefly, as if life had to be lots and lots of laughs, had to be reaching for the stars and the pre-dawn summer's fleeting light. The city is waking. Where are you waking? Yeah, 2 or 3.
Okay. Before Gerard reads a couple of his poems, I guess I have one last question, which is, you've known a lot of poets in your life. I mean, your archives and correspondence at Yale are amazing, from Charles Olson to Allen Ginsberg to John Wieners. I mean, lots and lots of poets. What is your assessment of Rene's poetry, of Rene as a poet, when you look back on him?
Well, I think the jury, it's too soon. The jury is still out, actually. But my assessment, my personal assessment, that Rene was someone whose work impressed me from the very first poem he wrote. Merely because I sensed something about him. I sensed that there was poetry in him that needed to come out from him, and he needed to find his own disciplined way of doing that. And I think, well, he did it actually to impress me. Actually, I mean, I was his first reader of a number of these poems. And then but there were always periods when there was, he wasn't writing at all. And the art criticism came much, much later. So, but at least at that point, he had the skill to write, and he had the intellectual focus to, go from poetry to art criticism and back. So, it was just something that I was very impressed with at the beginning.
Why don't you read something?
All right. I tend to write poems to people that I knew or admired or loved in one way or another, or didn't know at all for that matter, and I always tried to create stories. I found myself at a certain point in my life where I realized I could actually tell a story in a poem, which was always fun to do. This is called Valerie Elliott. It's 3:15, you're late. Ushering me into the dark hallway of the flat. I can't remember where, it's years now. We sat her mum beside her as we rocked on Sherry Strait and told me tales and showed me ants coat-colored snaps of Tom vacationing Bermuda, sallow like the sand surrounding him and smiling awkwardly. Who knows what that smile revealed? Not looking back beyond decline, years from when they met. A long line of hopefuls in the chill. The interview at Faber for that job would take her far and far beyond those years, and all for that one faked broken arm. The plaster cast won him over nonetheless, revealing no less a truth professed when she became keeper of the flame. Tom's books in the next room consumed by the same embers listened in. A chilly air, a drafty street. It's getting late. These poems are included in a book of mine that came out a year ago by Bottle of Smoke Press. The publisher is here tonight, helping to sell copies in the back of the auditorium. I'm going to read the poem called Stefan Zweig. It's called Stefan Zweig, 1881-1942. It's a very difficult poem to read because I found it was a very challenging poem to write. I realized that I needed to, which I don't really do in my poetry, but I could do it in this particular poem. I needed to transform myself into an 8-year-old boy in the reading of this poem. Stefan Zweig, come back, come back. Do not be afraid. Do not look the other way, but on all sides. Come take the road with me into those dark woods where eerie sounds of nature coalesce, where fledglings kiss you on the head and talk to you. Come fly with me, come be my friend in those darkest hours, in those darkest woods where even dreams are not permitted, but they move in nonetheless, because their darkest hours share with yours and mine to light the light, where our angels lead us on with whisperings, and they move on. Stefan, it's safe now. Come hold my hand. We circle home. The light is in the window. The dance is picking up. The dance is done. Can't you feel it now? Can't you? Can't you? I'm going to read two more, and that'll be it. Okay. This is called Peter Sheldall, called Baltus, a Creep, in the January 1st, 2018 issue of The New Yorker. It takes a creep to call someone a creep. It takes a lot of chutzpah. That's with an E and not an A, but you'd probably misspell it anyway. It takes evidence to prove you're right in your summation, but not if you're wrong. Show me the evidence. Show me what you don't like about this young girl, Therese, dreaming. Show me her bedroom sleeping, her chartreuse cat sleeping, the sunlight warm and sleeping. Show and tell. You've got no show to tell for it. You've got nothing on Baltus. Go tell it to the wind. What does the wind say? Where's the evidence? The hands outstretched psalm the evidence. I'm listening. Your silence betrays you, ta-ta-ta. But not the silence surrounding Therese in her sleep, in her waking dreams, in the very, very sunlight glimpsing through her window as she turns away in her private reverie. This last poem is based on a photograph that's the cover for my unpublished memoirs called In Search, in Remembrance of Things Past. It's called Gerardo Malanga and his son Gerard, First Holy Communion photo, May 30th, 1951. Do I look like you? Do I look like you at my age, having now outlived you 35 years or so? Am I gazing down at you? Or are you gazing down at me, frozen in the rooftop photograph with a grayless sky for lack of contrast, or how I felt that one instant when this moment froze? Pride shows on your face, don't you remember? With your hand on my left shoulder, so obscured I hadn't noticed till very recently. And now that recently is also very past. My resemblance to you is your resemblance of me. We've switched sides time-wise, though you're still very much alive in those so-called dead memories where what's forgotten is remembered once again or twice, if I can get beyond the Kodak grain, if I can fall asleep and leap time in reverse from those years turned into decades more to come. It's only you now standing in the photograph, in your polished shoes, shining always, waiting that I take my place with you, Jerry, Dad, as you surely placed your hand upon my shoulder quietly. Vieni qui, you'd say, as I came running on that blessed day and stood attention, you gazing down at me, the unpoetic me, soon to be poetic. Thank you.
By the way, thank you for your attentiveness. It's really nice in these distracted times to have people really listening like this. So Anne Waldman is going to read next. Then we're going to have the films. Then we're going to have a 10-minute break. And do stick around for the easy keys because you're going to hear some great music. Anne Waldman.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you so much for putting this together. And Gerard, that was so beautiful. Beautiful reading. So good to see you. So many of the poets loved Rene. He was part of the fabric of our lives for a while, and he was in our sort of frequency of just dailiness. And this is a time before cell phones and texting, and so you were never sure when somebody might show up. And he would always show up when you needed him to, when you wanted him to, often hungry, needing a place to sleep, needing to store things. And I did start to worry about the scattered, text, so when it was possible, trying to hold on to things. He gave me this gorgeous book, Italian-made notebook that he'd filled with beautiful collages and his own writing and all kinds of scraps of things, very, very elegant. Clearly had spent a lot of time with it, with Elmer's glue, and so when I treasured it, it had feathers and sequins, it was, bulging, and I had it for a number of years, and I kept it wrapped, and I was going to send it, to one of the archives, and then he showed up one day. This was a few years later, and he said, "Where is that book?" And I went through this, oh my God, I want to keep it, I want to keep it. I'm afraid it'll get ruined or just, it'll get lost. And I don't know where it is. It could be somewhere. I had to get, he needed it, he needed to sell it, etc. There's a gorgeous painting, self-portrait of Rene that's in my archive. Actually, Raymond has a picture of it with looking like this great emperor with a laurel wreath, which is what he was. But for I think for a lot of us, Robert Creeley adored him, Ted Berrigan, he was so literary and literate, and one knew that he was a quick, he could pick up things very quickly, so he could read something and grok the whole, historical period. He could talk about cochineal, where cochineal comes from, these little beetles where, Quattrocentro painting, Renaissance, etc. And so he was, scholarly in this way, and so obsessive about things, great to go to museums with and look at things with. And then, I always thought he was a combination of Oscar Wilde, Ronald Furbank, and John Wieners at times. So a very interesting cocktail. So this is just a couple of lines for him, just notes of kind of remembering a few of the outings. Talking about how get kicks in off the past, no culture, no literature, rivaled and reviled in you, lyricist of heart, and the astute cut, the way you could cut the deep arche we set eyes to, but instanter on the mark, that's Olson, instanter, the notion of kinetics. Rene was incredibly kinetic. Colorful kinetics of all you embodied. It is a body poetics, wittiest in the room, always in the century, in both of them, the hottest, the mostest in a culture, that's from Murray Baraka, known for false prophets, false copies, break like porcelain the heart. Rene, how are you permitted to be so much an aspiration of ourselves, you like an entheogen we got addicted to? Heavenly muse, oh, vibratory life where objects scream with value their bejeweled facets, and down and dirty too, cat fights and maxes, histrionics, aching to be yourself. Dimmed already, dimmed further, no, us by loss. In a strobe, flashes of recognition, roll call of the 60s, 70s, high guilt, 80s, king of the raft, Louis XIV's days, Versailles, below 14th Street days, how many worlds crossed, how many bullets have we just dodged, Golden Night, Central Park, all night vigils ending at the sofa on St. Mark's Place. Or outside Naropa Institute, Sacred Heart Summer, just passing through, making a fuss at the guru, the bohemian pomp, people trying to get magisterial for the century. My dear, it simply isn't Tibet, is it, on seeing the Rockies? Charging at Gregory Corso, that demon, bursting onto many scenes. Who do you love? And then, I wanted to read a poem that Rene wrote for me, which I adore, and I hope it'll appear so more people can see it at some way. It's just so funny. For Anne. Hello, This is the magical voice of Rene Ricard. This is the healing voice of Dr. Rene Richards, tennis pro. This message is coming from my golden throat, from my heart. Hello. This is the comforting voice of Rene Ricard Enterprises, Rene Ricard Agency. Hello. Rene Ricard Studio of Sentiment, Rene Ricard Productions calling, Rene Ricard speaking. Hello, this is Rene Ricard in a contemplative mood at the Rene Ricard House of Fame, the beat poems of Rene Ricard. You are fortunate enough to be speaking to Rene Ricard. This is he. This is the much vaunted Rene Ricard, who can drive them to suicide, who can and has pushed them over the edge, over the brink, under whose wrathful glare women have been trapped, transfixed, deer caught in the headlight on a desert road at night, frightened out of their wits, scared shitless, thrilled. This is Rene Ricard, your faithful servant. Here is just another sarcastic remark from that big phony Rene Ricard. Friend to the rich, enemy of the people, that Rene Ricard, his lies and more lies. I am Rene Ricard, the third person, the affirmative, the uppercase. My infinitives never split. The superlative, the hyperbolic, the mot juste. Rene Ricard, this is she. Love to Rene.
Okay, 3 films by Rita Barros, who was really kind of a savior for Rene in his last 10 years. Roll film. So we'll take a little break now. It was very important for us to keep this event free, but if you have any extra money, there are books by the readers, the recording is here, poster, etc. And we'll reconvene.
We are the Easy Keys. We want to thank Raymond for inviting us. I'm really happy to play these songs for you tonight.
Like Joan Crawford and Suzanne and God. No, we walked into a cocktail party. Announce your beliefs, you said. I've got religion, like the way we got Fiesta wear years before the prices went up. God of the penitent and the mystic, so too is there. Oh, God made sound for the silly people. There's God of the penitent and the mystic, so too is there. Oh, God made sound for the silly people. So I took down the e-car, put up a crucifix. Now my apartment opens up, and the saints all flying from the top, only lying with new decor. Oh, heaven is still into deco. As there's a God of the penitent and the mystic, so too is there, oh God mid-sound, oh the silly people. As there's God of the penitent and the mystic, so too is there, God mid-sound, oh the silly people. Heaven is still into deco. Thank you. Got revolver, ablaze in the sun. Oh, 1,000 angels facing, mesmerize everyone. I was once a lily of the valley. Now I'm just painting in the dark. Oh, it's me and my shadow and my golden voice. And your face is serpent's kiss. Oh, a dreamed about Morocco. Start my own career. Oh, the boy flies and the poet follows. Asleep in angels' arms. Oh, wake up hallucinating. Lock the window so I don't jump out into this glorious view. I've become so corrupt. Oh, and so have you. Oh, I feel so spent after a night with you. Oh, in my hair. Oh, we talked about the Aztecs. Oh, I bit you like Cortez. Now I'm lost in Tibet. so I don't jump out. Oh, into this glorious view. Oh, I've become so corrupt. Oh, but so have you. Got a revolver, ablaze in the sun.
Thank you so much.
This next song is called Richard Hambleton. It's one of the songs in our set that is a direct replica of Rene's poems. A lot of the songs are pastiches of poems and pastiches of images from remembrances like we heard this evening. This song is 100% Rene, top to bottom.
When I was hungry, he gave me drugs. When my wound was open, he shook the carpet, the flurries of dust. That's my friend, oh, that's my friend, oh, that's my friend. When I tried to write, he turned on the sender. If I hadn't slept for days, oh, he was on his way out. Oh, that's my friend. Oh, that's my friend. That's my friend. In the Bronx, the lights are going out. In Queens, one by one, love is gone. Life goes out, 2 by 2 in my heart. Oh, that's my friend. That's my friend. Oh, that's my friend.
Thank you.
year ago, my house burnt up, burnt down. Oh, I never put out the flame. Oh, I never washed my favorite jeans. I only know where I've been from the stain. Down through the ages, oh, we each pick our favorites. Choose something gutsy. Oh, the sun is always setting on my heart. A word you don't understand is like a picture you cannot see. Neither one is worth a damn, and you don't look trustworthy. Sometimes when someone enters your mind, they leave pieces of theirs behind. Oh, when the feeling don't stop, it just piles up. Down through the ages, oh, we each pick our favorites. Choose something gutsy. Oh, the sun's always setting on my heart. Sometimes our hero becomes the dragon. You can tell by the bones at the mouth of the cave.
This next tune we're going to play, it's the song that was the genesis of all these songs.
That's the next tune after this.
Oh, the tune after the next tune. What's the next tune?
Half-Life.
Ooh, next tune's one of my favorites. The tune after the next tune is the Genesis tune. 3 years ago, Raymond was the guest editor at the Brooklyn Rail, and he published a tribute to Rene Ricard with a lot of poems, with paintings, a lot of remembrances, and that was a very moving thing for us to find, and we, without thinking too much about it, made a song with what we had there and sent it off to Raymond, sort of a fun Saturday. And on Monday when Raymond wrote back, he was not only positive, but he was enthusiastic and he was supportive and he encouraged us to write more songs. And as the estate executor, he also gave us his word that we wouldn't get into legal trouble with any of this.
He was just saying no, he was lying.
Helen, Helen, my dear, please, please pass the beer. Oh, my ship's afloat on rather turbulent seas. And if God is love, there is no God like the one between you and me. In the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug. Then the judge told my father, he said, "Why did you shoot him again?" Oh, my father said, he said, "I couldn't stand watching him suffer in the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug, in the half-life of a drug." It may come as no surprise, the darkest day begins with sunrise. God will forgive us, 'cause that's a job. Love will take us to faraway places, makes no promise of self-safe return. And if in hell, oh, the flowers ain't got no scent, and the food ain't got no flavor, why should flame have any heat at all? Who left who? Was it me or was it you? It's all so crazy I can't recall. Can't find my keys, oh, they're probably in my black jeans, but I ain't seen them in a while. Good intentions pave the road to misery. Oh, your confusion's natural. Simple mention, sometimes that's all you need. Rene Ricard at the Chelsea Hotel. If in hell, oh, the flowers ain't got no scent, and the food ain't got no flavor, why should flame have any heat at all?
Too loud. Stand back.
Stand back.
Stand back.
Don't stand close.
When I die, don't bury me, oh, just throw away my hotel key. You said you'd save a room in your heart for me, and I hope it's a smoking room.
Save a room
Oh, at least with a balcony.
Your heart for me.
Oh, you know why? Oh, 'cause you know me. Oh, how quickly your literary Parnassus devolves into a crack party. How I'm alive is more than a mystery. And love is luxury housing. Oh, the lease expired, rent still unpaid. Oh, eviction was posted, no one noticed. Oh, until the next tenant moved in. And I hope it's a smoking room, or at least with a balcony. Oh, you know why? Oh, 'cause you know me. How quickly your literary Parnassus devolves into a crack party. Oh, how I'm alive is more than a mystery. When I woke, the glorious light beckoned. Shall I go or should I stay? I chose the light, it was the devil. Oh, now I choose the light most every day. I was given a three-piece suit from the widow of a friend. Oh, my underwear was stolen when I left it on a park bench. And I hope it's a smoking room, or at least with a balcony. Oh, you know why? Oh, 'cause you know me. Oh, how quickly your literary Parnassus devolves into a crack party. How I'm alive is more than a mystery.
Probably should have asked closer to the beginning, but can you hear both instruments? Yeah? Okay. All right, well, this is the last song, so.
The song's called Blue Bayou. It's a poem of Rene's. Blue Bayou for Dickie Landry. only 18, working in a gas station, working to pay off a new car. When he came in, oh, a radio was playing. He blew his brains out, oh, blue bayou, bayou, blue bayou, bayou. God, if I were you and I had to choose, I'd take the young, the beautiful, and the good. God, if you were me, what would you believe if I took the young, the beautiful, and the good? Rain was coming down so thick it seemed planned out. Crack of lightning and then finish. Oh, you loved him, now he is no more. Now the backyard looks so different. Blue bayou, bayou, and blue bayou, bayou. God, if I were you and I had to choose, I'd take the young, the beautiful, and the good. God, if you were me, what would you believe if I took the young, the beautiful, and the good? Bird sits on a windowsill, went to work alone, he didn't come home. He was a good kid with all the crooks and politicians. He was a good kid with all the crooks and politicians. They killed my son, Blue Bayou, Bayou, Blue Bayou, Bayou. God, if I were you and I had to choose, I'd take the young, the beautiful, and the good. God, if you were me, what would you believe if I took the young, the beautiful, and the good? Blue Bayou, Bayou, Blue Bayou, Bayou.
Thank you so much. And we did record all these tunes, and we do have the albums over there if you're at all interested. So thank you so much.